hit the record button, and we're ready to go.
All right. Well, welcome everybody. Happy New Year. It's great to be back with you all. So today we're going to talk about, well, anybody who knows me knows I absolutely adore Spanish wine and Portuguese wine. Really, the entire Iberian Peninsula I am good with. And there are many reasons for that, but it really comes down to the fact that so many of the wines of this region are tied deeply to tradition and history and the climate that they grow in. I mean, there's a lot of uh, the wines are very deliberate, and so I really I love the stories that come with these wines. And I mean, quite they're delicious wines, so there's that. But there's just that added benefit of having a good story. And today we're going to taste one wine, and we'll talk about why I just picked one wine. But this wine comes from the region of Toro, and I pulled up a map because I wanted to, I'm gonna see if I can do the weatherman thing here. Um, so Toro, if you see Madrid in the center, Toro is sort of at maybe the 10 o'clock. Um, it sits in a larger region called Castilla y León, and is an area where you can see just north of Castilla y León, a mountains. There you can see kind of a topographical representation of mountains north of that. And so the kind of the way to think about Toro is it's the foothills, and in some cases, and kind of a high plateau in most of it. So higher elevation, it does sit in sort of a rain shadow, so it's fairly arid. But this area has been part of human tradition for a very long time. If you go over to the where you see Porto, right underneath Castilla y León, Porto, a port city, the port city in Portugal, famous for the houses that age port, the fortified wine. The city of Porto sits along the Douro River. Now it's Douro in Spain. It's Duero it's Douro in Portuguese. It's Duero in Spanish. And so that river begins actually in the mountains north of Toro, and eventually dumps out into the ocean at Porto. So this has been an area where humans have migrated. They have the river provides easy access, so there's travel, there's commerce, and that's pretty much what happened in Toro. So where we are is essentially right across the border, within maybe 60 kilometers, uh, past the border of Portugal. So that's generally where we're going to focus. And I'm going to switch here so that we can get a better sense of what the region looks like. So, as I said, very arid, but very old. Been around for a very long time. The area originally had people growing grapes around 200 BC. There were some tribes that eventually later had to deal with both the Romans and the Moors. They that helped shape their tradition, but during the around the 12th century, King Ferdinand, 13th century, King Ferdinand and Isabella, were King Ferdinand was the king of Castilla y Leon, and fell in love with these wines. And what the wine of Toro is a localized variant of Tempranillo. So on the Portuguese side, they have two grapes, Tinta Roriz and Aragonés. Both of those are Tempranillo. In Spain, there's a Tempranillo that is used for the production of Rioja, not too far from here. But the variant of Tempranillo in the region of Toro is unique to it. It is called Tinta de Toro. And so grapes have been grown here since 200 BC. The Spanish loved the wines from this year. In fact, interesting fact, Christopher Columbus took Tinta de Toro to on his voyage to the New World. And so that was, I mean, it was a great selection, and we'll even talk about why it might have been a pretty good selection as we get into tasting. But as you can see behind me, the region is marked by these beautiful kind of medieval structures. The Romans built aqueducts that you can find in this general area, um, castles, monasteries, things like that. It's very regal. And I would say, I was looking at this picture, and I would say probably those trees in the background were probably planted, because you just don't find a lot of trees in Castilla y León. They get almost no precipitation a year. And so, in fact, part of that is, I mean, again, it's in the rain shadow. It's sheltered from the moisture that you would get from the Bay of Biscay just to the north. But because it is so arid, plants do compete with each other. And you'll notice in the vineyard behind me, I guess it sort of shows it, the average spacing for vineyards in Toro is 10 by 10, which is highly inefficient and very I mean, it affects production, because with that type of spacing, the vineyards are getting maybe 2 tons per acre. Now, to put that into context, a $300 bottle of wine from Napa Valley, it probably is producing wine from a vineyard that is deliberately controlled to about 2 tons an acre. So the yield on these vineyards is very, very low. The spacing, as I said, not super efficient, but that's how it's been. That's how it is. That's how it must be. Now there have been some changes. This area, because it has had such a long history, this area is actually the region of Castilla y León is home to some of the oldest oldest vines and vineyards in Spain, which says a lot considering how long Spain has been making wine. But I mean, the average vine in Toro is at least 40 years, with the oldest being in 180 to 200 years. I mean, they're really old vines, but they've managed to survive this challenging environment. And the unfortunate thing is, I mean, part of the reason I like this region is that unless there is appreciation for it, it will probably go away. Climate change obviously is making grape growing more challenging. You're trying to look for efficiencies, and in this particular case, there just aren't any. I mean, the vines have to be spaced the way they are. They require a lot of labor in the vineyard. The people who have the best vineyards are generally the most skilled and the luckiest, because it does, when you are challenged for water and nutrients, there is that issue, and so you have to be good at what you do. But there have been a lot of stories where I mean, a lot of instances where vineyards like this have been removed and replanted, and that's tragic, because these vines, again, they're some of Spain's oldest, and they are producing some really amazing wine. So in order to protect them, the Spanish government, I mean, it used to be that irrigation was not even permitted. So if you wanted to make a wine from the region of Toro and have that Toro sticker on it, you were not allowed to irrigate, and they've changed that rule. They're also allowing with irrigation the spacing to get a little closer. So as vineyards get replanted, as new vineyards go in, probably we're going to see density increase just so that they can be more productive with the land that they have. But these wines are just I love this wine. Tinta de Toro is very different from Rioja, which we've tasted in previous sessions. Rioja is a little bit lighter on the palate. When we taste this, you notice very firm tannins. I mean, good grip to it. It's got some punch, and it is in part because, I mean, these grapes do not, again, they don't swell with water, so they don't have that ability to dilute. So the skins of the grapes are fairly thick, because they have to deal with preserving water. They have to be thick enough to not, release moisture easily from the grape. And as a result, there's less juice. So there's more skin and less juice. But the concentration, I mean, these vines are going 30, sometimes 50 feet into the ground to extract water. And those vines are sucking up all of this complexity that this, this soil, it is there's a lot of clay, there's a lot of limestone, is providing for the vines. So the vines develop more complexity, but the trade-off is they don't develop as many clusters. So the yield is lower. So the wine that we're going to taste today is from a producer. The producer is Telmo Rodriguez, and Mr. Rodriguez is an advocate for Toro. His winery began about 30 years ago to put focus on not just wine from Toro, but premium wine from Toro, and assembling, oftentimes, because there's been so much history of growing here, one property is owned. The properties are smaller, so you don't see large single swaths of vines. They're owned by smaller farmers. And so Rodriguez went around and created, essentially, not a cooperative, because certainly all the wines are marketed under his brand, but a group of growers that he goes back to every year and works with and consults. And these growers are incentivized to keep their vineyards in good condition and can continue growing Tinta de Toro. So Rodriguez is really an ambassador for the region, and this wine, he does several. This is sort of his mid-tier wine. It's called Gago, and Gago, if you notice on the bottle, it has sort of an old school lowercase g, and Rodriguez wanted to use something that showed history, so that's an old font. But then he added a horn to off the end to give it sort of a branding of Toro. So this guy, I've liked his wines a lot. He has a less expensive wine that I was not able to get, called the Hezegago. But this wine is a great representation of the wines of Toro. So if you have it in your glass, give it a little swirl and nose it. I will say, I should probably back up first and say these wines are not, they're from a distributor that I don't always have access to. So they come in, and when they're gone, it is a while before I'm able to get them again. But this was a recent shipment from this distributor, and so it was sort of a spontaneous decision to do this wine. But so I didn't taste this particular bottling before today. It, as you can see, very tannic wine, traditional to the region of Toro. And but the nice thing is, if you don't finish it tonight, it will continue to open up and improve. And that actually, going back to the fact that Christopher Columbus took this wine on his voyage, that's in part why he took it. It was not only a great wine, but it didn't fall apart. It was going to be on an ocean voyage for a while. It needed to be a hardy wine, and this really fit the bill. I mean, I can't imagine when exactly the wine did fall apart, I would assume it was in barrel and not in a bottle. But just the amount of oxidation that this wine has just in the last, I've had mine open for about 2 hours. It's still really tight. It will continue opening up, but for if you happen to be planning any voyages into the great unknown, a great wine to take with. It will endure the journey.
For those of you who are going to space in your own spaceship, this would be perfect.
Mm-hmm.
Just saying.
Yeah, I mean, so again, lots of fine grain tannin, and when we talk about like tannin is that bitterness, that astringency that you get. You typically find it. I mean, you do find it in woody material. So coffee beans have a lot of tannin in it. Tea has tannin in it. Chocolate, but grape skins, stems, and seeds have quite a bit. And so the thicker the skin, obviously, the more color you're going to get. You can see that this has pretty dark, like, dark cranberry, dark, not really eggplant, but a deep ruby color. Uh, and it is, and there's some tannin, but we would call this fine grained. So sometimes you take like, think of over steeped black tea. So you leave the tea bag in the sitting on the spoon after you've pulled it out of your cup, and you sip that last little spoonful that leaches out of the tea bag. Those are not fine grained tannins. Those are pretty gritty tannins. You immediately feel a scratchiness. These are more like the tannins that you would find in a really good cup of coffee or chocolate, where they are, and it literally is the grain of tannin that you notice. The larger, the clunkier it is, the more you notice it on your tongue. The finer it is, the more silky and smooth it is. But this one has a fair amount of tannic grip. You notice that dryness. So when you have a wine like this, it's really saying, I'm great by myself, and I like this type of wine, so I don't mind the bitter, the astringency of the tannin. But the wine is sort of suggesting that maybe some dinner, a meal would be even better. And this is an area where, again, Toro, there's a region that, I mean, there's a reason that word is used. There have historically been bullfights in the some of the cities, that little towns rather, that exist in Castilla y León. So they're very famous for their bullfights. In fact, Gago is a breed of bull that was prized back in the day. But so if you're thinking about things to pair with this, I mean, think of not I would say the bull. You don't necessarily need to go and get yourself a big bull steak, but the meat, the full bodied, big bold flavors. So in this region, they eat a lot of lamb. The lamb has sort of a rusticity that pairs well with the rusticity of the wine, and earthiness, and then they eat a lot of pork. And there are a number of ways that they prepare the pork. Probably one of the most famous in this region. I apologize to those who love their pigs, but it is a suckling pig, a roasted suckling pig. So the pig is still nursing them from the mama, and they take it and roast it, and unfortunately, it sounds awful, but it's spectacularly delicious. They are very humanely raised. I will point that out. That is something they pride themselves on. Um, but so roast pork, lamb could be roasted, could be grilled. Certainly, beef is up there. But for as much connection as this region has for beef, as you can see, there's not a lot of grazing material for cattle, and so they're brought in for fighting, but you don't see them as much, at least immediately in this area. Further east in the mountains, you find them, but yeah, pork and lamb. So something like that, something with some fat that will counterpoint those tannins. That's quite nice. Now, so why just one wine today? Well, the region of Toro, 90 plus percent of all of the wine is Tinta de Toro. They don't produce other grapes for the most part. I mean, minor amounts, but not commercially. Tempranillo is definitely the signature red grape. Further south, they do a little bit. I mean, yeah, further south, they do a little bit of white wine, but again, for the most part, this is a red wine region. Wanted to find. I think I have one more photo to show. Mhm. If I can. There we go. So here is an example of one of those really slide out of the way. That is that's kind of an example of what the old vines look like. I mean they're bush trained because they want them fairly close to the ground. Um, that helps with ripening, but it also protects them in the wintertime because this area, I mean, the summers are hot, but the winters are cold. And so the vines to survive winter kill, bush training is kind of the traditional way to plant these. So that's literally what happens. These vines bush out and sort of flop over. They look like a shrub that you haven't pruned very well. But the quality of the fruit that this vine is producing is just spectacular. A lot of the wines are very long lived, and unfortunately, like with the work of Tomo Rodriguez, we're seeing more people take care to promote these wines. There's several very high end wineries that have moved in there since, and we're seeing a lot more attention to these wines. But big fan. I hope you are as well. Let me switch back, and then we can start chatting. All right. So, thoughts, questions on these wines?
We don't have a huge group, so if somebody wants to unmute and ask a question, or in the chat, either one.
Well, we can honestly we can chat about anything.
Yeah.
So if people have other questions, by all means, let's talk.
I will say that when I opened mine up about an hour before the meeting and I took a drink and my eyes almost crossed. The stringency was crazy. I see Kent agreeing with me. And the hour has made a tremendous difference. And I keep aerating it and swirling it, and it's getting better and better as I go on. But boy, when I first took a drink, I thought my eyes were going to cross, Steve. It was crazy, tannins, crazy.
Well, and it is I mean, this is even a 2017, so it's not even a young wine, relatively speaking.
Yeah.
And and yet has got, a long life ahead of it. I mean, mine is just starting to open up. I mean, it's the notes of Tinta de Toro. I mean, they differ from other areas in northern Spain. I mean, Ribera del Duero does a similar style. I get more red fruits from Ribera del Duero. Certainly, Rioja is more elegant because you've got altitude and elevation rather in the vineyards and cooler nights, and you just get this beautiful elegance to Rioja. This one is more structured, definitely more hedonistic, bigger, chewier, bolder. But I'm starting to get it. The nose of Toro is a lot of like crushed berries and cherries, blackberry, black raspberry, maybe some currant, and then some dried things, maybe fig or even almost like Yeah, I get a lot. I mean, I get. I'm trying to think of other dried fruits. I don't. I mean, I would say not like stone fruits, but
I
definitely
got
that.
I got a
Big,
little bit of blueberry when I
yeah, yeah,
first
yeah.
drank it too.
Yep, yep. And and then almost like maybe some dried mushroom. I mean, it actually is, the longer it stays open, often you'll notice more of that kind of dried mushroom, like porcini, like dried porcini smell coming out of it. But it's again a tremendous food wine. Um, Definitely, like it will soften out as it gets more air to it, but having this with a meal, actually barbecue is that's probably the first place I ever, I mean, the first way I ever had this was with Kansas City style barbecue, because with barbecue you need something that's got some punch, that's going to stand up to smoke and fat and spice and all of that. And this wine, I mean, this wine does, it gets aged out in large, not the small size, but kind of the large size, the barrique sized French barrels. So it sees French oak. The oak is probably fairly muted. I mean, it's not neutral, but it's not brand new either. Um, but it so that's where you're getting kind of some of that spice. There's a little bit of a dustiness to it, but really a cool food wine, and something that's hearty. I mean, I admittedly I don't drink a lot of Toro wines in the summertime. I like a little lighter of a wine, but in the wintertime I like some stuffing with it. And this one
Yeah,
definitely has stuffing.
Kathleen did have a question. She noted that you said it mainly a region of red, and I know farther south there are some whites. Are there any whites at all produced in this area, or is it
Yeah,
just
I
not?
mean, no, I mean it's under 10% of their total production is white. Let's say Verdejo, maybe. I mean, there are other wines. There's certainly white wines that are made in Castilla y León, just further south. Well, south and east. Um, this area, it really is. It comes down to, it's the grapes that grow here have to be equipped to grow here. And the more, a grape with a thinner skin, and typically, not all, but many white grapes have thinner skins typically. So a grape with a thinner skin, maybe more susceptible to sunburn and raisinating and things like that. So I mean, it's a grape that grows here because it loves to grow here, but also um, it's, I mean, that's I guess that's the other thing that is a marker of a lot of Spanish and Portuguese wine. The grapes are grown where the grapes should grow. I mean, they want nature to do the work. It's a lot harder to force nature to do what you want, because you won't win in most cases, and if you do, you'll be exhausted because it's a constant battle. Here, the vines struggle, but they struggle, they're happy to struggle. And I think the white, the whites, it, I would guess I mean, the lack of water is probably, the lack of water and the heat are probably the two things that discourage more white wines. I mean, that would be my guess. Uh,
Steve,
because it,
is the
but
regulations against irrigation based on maintaining water through the Douro through both countries all the way north and south for other
no,
uses?
no, because they're actually similar. I mean, there are a number of regions around the world um that simply restrict irrigation. My recollection is Bordeaux is one of them, but I can't remember whether that's changed as well. But no, there are plenty of regions around the world where irrigation is prohibited. And in part that is because, the idea is that nature is making the wine. You want nature to do the work. And because it really, when nature does its work, I mean, the best wines in the world, generally speaking, are ones that you know the the winemaker is more of a shepherd, and less of a conductor. It's the he wants it to do certain things, and sometimes, or she wants it to do certain things. Sometimes it will work, but you have to have nature's buy-in. And um, so that's, I think, something that's very part of growing grapes in Spain and Portugal. And so when those traditions are set, I mean, it's frustrating, and I think the governing body of Toro agreed with the growers that with climate change and the need to sell wine to keep these vines alive, allowed them to, well, all right, maybe we can allow, they don't need to be spaced 10 by 10 if they're irrigated. So we can allow irrigation that will also increase the yield. Because that's the problem. I mean, you can't really, I mean, it's hard to tell a grower, hey, you have tradition and history and heritage, but we're going to prevent you from profiting because you're getting almost nothing out of your vineyards. And so this is a good compromise.
We have two questions here, both pretty interesting. Shelley asked, what indications do you look for to know that a wine is opened up enough to be at its best?
Oh, yeah.
What is opening up and what is the end of it, so to speak?
Well, okay. So the I would say that this is going to sound like not really an answer, but you know it when you smell it. A wine like this, I mean, it's got inky, deep color. So the part of the grape, the skin, which provides flavor and color, clearly did its job because this wine is colorful. Now, I should say there are wines around the world, particularly some in bulk wines in California, that are actually there is a grape-based food coloring called mega purple, and mega purple yeah, it's great. I mean, a very very savvy name, but mega purple is a grape based coloring agent. So um, and it's used for bulk wines because people assess things based on color. But this part of Spain, mega purple is banned. That is not permissible. You can only use grapes that are grown, and only certain grapes that are grown. But this wine has a lot of color, and in thinking about the region that it comes from, um, it, it's not going to be an immediately approachable wine, or the odds. I mean, there's some that are from younger vines, that are a little juicier. I mean, it is possible to make a wine from this region that doesn't require a 3-hour decanting process, but I would say probably the better of them do, just because the again there's a lot of chemistry that has to relax um in the wine. Basically, the wine will smell and taste more as it oxidizes, but these grapes in particular have the natural ability of, or the natural benefit of many antioxidants. So the wine is resisting oxidation, and as wine lovers, we want to encourage oxidation. So when you know that it's there, I mean, it's if you I mean, I'm like I said, I'm already starting to get more things out of this glass than I did before. And that's an indication that more is probable. I mean, more is likely to come. But yeah, the color for me would suggest, well, if it's got that much color, if it's seen that much skin contact during its making, it's got to smell and taste more than it is right now. And so I mean, the same thing happens, if you have a wine that's too cold, red or white, it just it's sort of dumb. It doesn't it does it's not alive. And some wines don't escape that, and usually that's a factor of um the quality and where it came from and whatnot. I mean, there's some wines you taste and it's like it's never going to be anything else. But this one, based on its region, based on its color, would suggest that, and certainly actually based on the tannic structure. I mean, it again, it spent enough time to extract flavor and color out of that skin. There should be a little more coming, given what has already been extracted, and it's so those would be the indicators, I would say, that
Kathleen has a follow-up question to this, which leads me to kind of add a little to her question. Following Shelley's question, would you recommend decanting this wine to help it breathe a little more? But let me add to that, maybe a little explanation of decanting and aerating and what the
yeah.
difference is.
Oh, absolutely. No, that's a great question. So, there are two. So, decanting and aerating are often used interchangeably, and there are similarities, but there are also differences. So, basically, again, the idea of exposing your wine to air is to force oxidation, to get more oxygen into it such that it reveals more flavors and aromas. Because that's how, I mean, if I always, remind people, if you want to know the value of oxygen, um try to taste something when you have a cold. It tastes like nothing. You can't get the oxygen to work such that if you plug your nose, Kool-Aid tastes like chlorinated water. I mean, it has it's muted. And so when you certain wines, not all wines need decanting. I mean, I'm sort of lazy in the fact that doesn't if I know a wine can probably get away with not being decanted, then I don't have to clean a decanter. Uh, but if it does, so the decanter, aeration is the process of incorporating air into your wine. I I'm not the greatest advocate for things that are simply aerators. I think that we have plenty of those tools already in our arsenal. I mean, anybody with a wine glass technically has an aerator. I mean, in fact, there are many times where I'll take a bottle that I've opened and I want to add some more air to it. You just give it a shake and then you sit it down, and it provided there's not sediment in it, which this one doesn't have. So now I've just aerated that wine, and I didn't have to spend anything, to do it. I think there's some somewhat dubious claims about what aerators can and can't do, or can do rather. I don't believe that you can pour your wine through a funnel that gurgles and change it when the wine has literally just been exposed to micro amounts of air for a fraction of 1 second. That doesn't seem to be scientific to me. So, aeration is the process of incorporating air. A decanter really does two things. One, it provides a vessel that has a large head space where you can aerate it. But for older wines, it's also a vessel for removing the sediment. So let's say this wine did have some sediment. I would stand it on its end for, say a couple hours, maybe even a day, to let all of the sediment collect down in this indentation, the punt. And then I would find a decanter and I would pour off the wine into the decanter, leaving that sediment in the bottom of the bottle. So it wouldn't be necessarily trying to expose oxygen. It would be to remove the gritty sediment that an old bottle potentially would have. Hopefully that was a long answer, but hopefully that covered it.
But the other side of this is, in this particular case, as much aerating as you could do early on would be good,
Oh yeah.
but swirling does as much as anything else.
Yeah, right. I mean, you're the more I mean that's why you generally want a glass that holds between 15 and 20 ounces, 14 and 20 ounces of liquid, so that you can really, you can put 3 or 4 ounces in it and really kind of jostle it around and incorporate some air into it. After shaking that wine, I want to try it because I am starting to notice um, a little bit of floral notes like purple flowers, lavender, lilac, something in that realm. Um, it's still sort of tucked in there with some oak, but I'm starting to get a little bit of some floral notes, elevated floral notes. So it is, we're coaxing it out. But yeah, this with a
Yes.
steak, this with some fat. It would do wonderfully with some rich fatty food.
Shelley also asked, do red wines always need more time to open up than white wines or rosés?
So yes, absolutely. Um, and again, it comes back to what makes that wine red is why it's tannic rather, and enclosed. White wine, when a white wine is made, the skins, where all of those antioxidants are located, the it will spend, sometimes a couple of hours, and then the skins are removed and the wine is forever separated from the skins, the juices. So whites will, I think for whites, it's probably more of an issue of temperature. Um, Finding that sweet spot for temperature, because sometimes, you and rosé as well. Sometimes you smell a rosé or a white wine, and it just, we would describe it as closed. It's not open. It is not giving up much. And so we'll kind of cup the glass and try to warm it up just a little bit. I mean, I would argue that whites and rosés do like a little bit of a chill, but the amount of chill varies from wine to wine. But no, for the most part, white wines. I mean, I'm trying to think of an example of where I would decant a white wine, but I'm not thinking of one. Well, actually, no. I guess if there were any sediment, like tartaric acid, like tartrates. Um, but no, I mean, usually there's nothing in the white wine that would require, to separate out anything. It wouldn't be throwing sediment. So I would say, yeah, that for the most part, white wines can open up in the glass.
Scott had a question. If a wine continues to improve through oxidation, yeah, should you keep the cork off?
Oh, yeah. No. So, oftentimes people will open their bottle of wine, removing the cork, to allow it to open. And technically, you've opened the bottle, but the only part of that bottle of wine that's being exposed to air is that probably a nickel-sized space at the top of the neck of the bottle. So you definitely want to open the bottle and then pour the bottle into a larger vessel. You want a large headspace. That's why often, decanters have that kind of pear shape, or some area in the decanter that spreads out. So instead of being deep, it's shallow but wide. Um, and that's really, I mean, opening the bottle, unless you do, and I really do. I encourage people to do it because it there's nothing wrong with the process. Take a bottle like this, pour off a little bit, stick the cork back in, shake it vigorously, let that air kind of incorporate. Maybe do it a couple times. But just to open the bottle and leave and remove the cork, unfortunately, not aerating much of the bottle, just that nickel size liquid that's exposed to air at the top of the bottle is the only part that's really, really opening up. So yeah, definitely if you're wanting to open the bottle, remove the wine from it and put it into a pitcher or a decanter.
Scott had another question. Apparently, Kathleen is booking a ticket to Portugal as we speak. And
Right.
so if, oh, she has, so apparently Scott is booking the ticket. Kathleen wants to know if I were to visit this region in my next life, what are the must visit areas?
In Spain or Portugal?
Or Portugal in
In
the
the Toro
Douro,
region.
Oh,
in the
In
Douro
the Douro,
flood
yeah,
basin, I
Yeah,
think is what they're saying.
yeah,
yeah.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Because they're planning a trip. I can see it in their eyes.
Yeah. Well, the city of Porto, on the Portuguese side is of course, you know, the most famous on the river. As you move in, I mean, the city of Toro is fairly small. I mean, there's not this region. I would probably not. I shouldn't say. Yeah. I would probably bypass this region as far as a personal visit, only because um, the vineyards, the wineries are vastly spread out. You will spend a lot of time driving from one place to the other. Um, but there is a region a little further inland, also in Castilla y León, called Ribera del Duero, and they grow Tempranillo there as well. The wineries are, I mean, it's still fairly arid, but it's further. The river valley has opened up a little more, and you have there's the city of Valladolid. There are a lot of wineries in around there, but no, I would say, I mean, you could literally just take that piece of northern Portugal and northern Spain and turn that into a summer. I mean, it's um, the this region is, I love the wines. They are similar but different. I mean, it's I wonder where this grape came from. I mean, it could have come from so many different places, given that they grow a similar grape under a different two similar grapes under a different name, and then there are even clones that are the same but different. Of Tempranillo, but just the number of variations of Tempranillo that have adapted to their local climate and become their own thing. I mean, I think that's amazing. I mean, I would never confuse this wine for Rioja. They're just, even though they're made with the same grape, they're just not the same wine. And this is a rugged environment, and the wine tastes like that. It captures that rugged nature, that if you're going to survive, you have to really want to, kind of environment.
So,
But
so what you're saying is visit Portugal or Spain in this area, go north or south, but if you see a Toro wine on the menu, order
Yes.
Yeah,
it.
yeah. I mean, well, and there in the region of Ribera, like when I was in Ribera del Duero, we were visiting a winery that prepared dinner for us, and they did a dish. It was roasted lamb done in a clay pot, a very traditional clay pot, to the region, and to this day, I have no idea how they did it. I mean, the meat was immensely flavorful. It kind of flaked away. The skin on the meat was almost like a rice cracker. It was absolutely spectacular, and we drank quite a bit of big, rich Tempranillo, and it just was a very, very happy moment. So, um, yeah, if you're in northern Spain and you happen to see suckling pig or any lamb dish indigenous to Castilla y León, definitely, like, Toro wines, or Ribera del Duero. Again, think of Ribera del Duero sort of like Napa and Sonoma. They're both great regions, and they're right next to each other. You just have to drive a little further to get from one to the other. I mean, that's all this is. But yeah, just delicious wines. And again, very, very food friendly to the cuisine of the region.
I happen to know that Steve went out of his way to get this wine. It's not readily available here. So, if
Oh,
you like it and you want to pick it up, he bought some extras. So
yeah, no, this is a wine that when Jamie and I were first learning about the wines of Toro in the 90s, we drank a lot of the De Hezagago, which is the less expensive version of the De Hezagago, maybe about $15. Um, this one normally, we did a deal for this. Normally this would be about 24, but we sold it for, I'm sorry, 24.99, so $25. This we did a deal for the library group at $20, but this would be a little pricier than it is now. But delicious wine. Absolutely. Yeah, we were excited that there is not a distributor who brings this particular wine in, and there's an arrangement that we have, a partnership with an existing distributor that we have who has a relationship with another distributor out of Texas that we were able to bring in some wines through them, and this is, yeah, it's a treat.
there is one more question, and I think she stepped away and missed the answer, but we'll go over it one more time. Laura asked, maybe I missed it, but I'd like to hear the answer to Scott's question. Does decorked wine improve due to additional oxidation? I heard that, I'm sorry, I'm having trouble reading this. I heard the part about an open bottle only results in the smallest amount of oxidation, excuse me,
Mhm.
to the very top of the bottle content. And so if you don't mind going over the idea of
Yeah,
decanting
yeah,
it
yeah.
into something else.
So if you are opening, if you do want to open the bottle to get some more air into it, do either open the bottle and pour it into a separate container, or open the bottle, pour off maybe a glass, put the cork back in, shake it until it's foaming inside the bottle. And again, not with a bottle that's old, because all that sediment gets mixed back in. But this bottle is not throwing any sediment, so that's not an issue. But yeah, if you don't want to dirty another vessel, just pour off a glass, put the cork back in, probably go to your kitchen just over the sink, shake it vigorously, and incorporate some air into it. But yeah, just opening a bottle of wine doesn't unfortunately do much for aeration.
Yeah, she said I was thinking more about leftover wine, but once again, there's so little space in the top that it
Mhm.
would be a matter of either shaking it or pouring it out into
Yeah,
something, right? Right.
yeah, yeah.
Okay.
And I would say, if you have an open bottle, just, regardless of whether it's white or red, we suggest keeping it in the fridge. Temperature slows down that oxidation, and so, it's not gonna preserve it forever, but it will extend it a couple more days. Just keeping it cool. Then you just let it warm to room temperature. So that it'll take a little planning, because you'll need some time to let it warm to room temperature, or 65 degrees doesn't really need to be room temperature, but warmer than your fridge. But the fridge is the best place to store wine.
Okay. Any other questions, folks, before we? Okay. Wait a minute. We have another question here.
I may have misunderstood, but I thought you were very much regretting the old vines that were destroyed or were talk of destroying. Uh, does it really matter if a vine is really, really old or if it's
Yes.
newer?
Yeah, it does. Basically, if you think about each vine as a factory with a finite amount of energy, um, for the most part, the younger vines, nature wants the vine to be prolific. So it sends out lots of shoots using energy, and it sends out multiple clusters of grapes, again, expending that finite amount of energy. And in many cases, in younger vineyards, they will deliberately not allow those shoots to grow. So they'll go in and they'll cut the shoots, or they'll even cut fruit, berry clusters, and just drop them to the ground. because they want the vine to focus its finite amount of energy on fewer clusters. An old vine does that naturally. The older the vine is, the more the vine kind of understands that it doesn't need to be as prolific as it once was. It doesn't need to propagate. And so it's more conservative with its use of energy. And so these vines, well, let me go back. Um, oop, all right. So with a vine like this, I can slide away. There we go. No, other way. There we go. So with a vine like this, that vine, as huge as it is probably producing maybe 3, 4 clusters of grapes in entirety. That's it. That's all it's producing. So that entire the effort, all of the energy for that vine is going into just a handful of clusters. And so when that energy is going into just a handful of clusters, the quality, the chemistry of those grapes is noticeably better. In fact, in most cases, young wines will not even. I mean, a vineyard is planted, and they won't even harvest the grapes for production of wine for, maybe 4 or 5 years.
Yeah.
The fifth year might be the first vintage where they're actually making wine, and it's probably not going to be that great. It's kind of be pretty thin as far as wine goes, because the grape, again, it's focusing on quantity over quality, and as it ages, maybe like everybody who ages, we focus more on quality over quantity.
There's one more. I know we're out of
Okay.
time, but
Oh, we're
there's
fine.
one more question that I have to ask because it's kind of funny and it's too good a question. I've been told that restaurants whiz freshly opened wine in a blender to aerate it. Is that true?
Um, Probably not in general. I mean, so have I ever done that? Yes, I have. It is, it is, we did it more for the experiment of doing. In fact, Jamie and I went over to Walmart and bought a blender that I think is still somewhere in our storage room, just to try this very thing. I would say probably not. I mean, the answer would be probably not done uh, fairly commonly, for the reason that, I mean, every blender, unless it's a bar blender, I mean, a kitchen blender at a restaurant, has a lot of extraneous flavors and smells. Um, a bar blender could be potentially used, but yeah, I don't. I would say if they're doing that, number one, they should tell you. Um, but I would say, what's wrong with a nice decanter? Your wine purveyor will probably track you down one if you ask. And it certainly looks better on the table than a frothy picture from the Vitamix.
Yeah. We're going to have to pretty much close out with that, but I have to tell you, Shelley wins for the best question of the century.
Absolutely, yes. No, I will say, so I should also say, Jamie and I did not find the aeration. I mean, it is a known technique. We did not find the aeration in the blender to be worth kind of the process of doing it. So anyway, that if that answers the question.
Yeah. I had a conversation in California with a winemaker once, and he was, in my ignorance, explaining to me aeration and the process and whatever. And his comment was patience.
Right, right. No, I mean, that is, no, that is absolutely true. I mean, you really should. Wine teaches us a lot of things, and patience is one of them. Waiting, there's some wines that are certainly, provide immediate gratification, but I mean, a couple hours from now, this wine is going to be different. Tomorrow, this wine is going to be different. And the patience of seeing what happens. I mean, that's the price of admission. You get that. What am I going to get at the end of this bottle?
Yeah.
And that's fine.
And then now we're going to close out because tomorrow my bottle is going to be gone. But so, shame on me. But
Yeah, yeah,
I
yeah.
find it a
My problem.
delicious wine and worth a single wine tasting for tonight. So I hope everybody enjoyed their evening. Thank you very much for joining us. Tomorrow.